If you wish to become a grandmaster, understand first that this game will consume more hours of disciplined study than almost any other pursuit on earth, all while offering you no physical outlet for the exhaustion it produces. You begin at 5 years old, sitting on a kitchen floor, watching your father move wooden pieces across a board with a seriousness that seems strange for something you assume is simply a game. He teaches you how each piece moves in a single afternoon. Within weeks, you are beating him, not because you understand grand strategy, but because you have somehow already begun to see patterns on that board that took him decades to recognize. He stops playing casually with you and starts, instead, taking you seriously in a way that quietly changes the entire trajectory of your childhood. You are enrolled in a local chess club by 6, sitting across boards from adults 3 and 4 times your age who initially treat you with the gentle condescension reserved for small children, a condescension that evaporates within a few months once you begin defeating them consistently. You learn early the specific uncomfortable dynamic of being a prodigy, adults who resent losing to a child, and mask that resentment poorly. You learn to sit perfectly still with your hands folded in your lap, regardless of what is happening across the board, because you have already discovered the game's first hidden rule. Visible emotion, whether triumph or distress, gives opponents information they can use against you that has nothing to do with the position itself. You are entered into your first rated tournament at 7, sitting for hours at a table too tall for your chair, playing game after game across a single weekend against opponents of wildly varying skill. And when it's over, you receive your first official rating number, a single figure that will follow you for the rest of your competitive life, rising and falling with every single public game you ever play. A number so central to this world that serious players learn to recite their rating the way other children recite their birthday. You begin studying seriously by 8, not simply playing games, but dissecting them, spending hours after school analyzing matches played by grandmasters decades before you were born, memorizing opening sequences, move by move, variation by variation. You learn the brutal, silent truth of modern competitive chess. At the highest level, the game is not primarily about creative improvisation. It is about the overwhelming depth of your preparation. Entire branches of known theory extending 20 or more moves deep that top players have completely memorized before a single original thought is required from either side of the board. You are matched with a coach by 9, a former titled player who takes you on not out of charity, but because talent at your level is rare enough that serious coaches actively seek out children exactly like you. Your training intensifies into something resembling a second, unpaid full-time job, layered directly on top of ordinary school. Hours every single evening spent on tactical puzzles, endgame theory, and the systematic, painful review of your own games. Your coach circles moves you played with a red pen the same way a strict teacher might circle a grammatical error, except here, each circled move represents a mistake that, at a high enough level, would have cost you an entire game. Your childhood narrows in ways your non-chess-playing friends will never fully understand. Weekends consumed by tournaments in unfamiliar cities. Summers spent at intensive chess camps instead of at the beach. Birthday parties missed because they conflict with a schedule set months in advance by an international federation, one that does not adjust itself around a 10-year-old's social calendar. You watch your parents make quiet, massive sacrifices you won't fully appreciate until much later. Driving long hours across state lines, paying for coaching sessions that cost more than family vacations, restructuring an entire household's daily rhythm around a single board, a game that offers absolute zero guarantee of ever returning the immense cost it has already extracted. You earn your first official title in your early teens, a designation that means very little to anyone outside serious chess circles. But inside them, it signals that you have crossed a definitive threshold, separating talented hobbyists from players with a legitimate path toward the professional tier. And the pressure shifts immediately because now you are no longer simply a promising child. You are a known quantity. Stronger players specifically prepare to face you. They dissect your previous games, move by move in advance, the exact same way you study theirs. And the anonymity that once allowed you to surprise opponents with unconventional ideas disappears permanently. You sacrifice your ordinary adolescence almost entirely by your mid-teens. You leave traditional school behind for an accelerated online program or enter a specialized academy built specifically for elite young chess players. You train 6 or more hours every single day, sitting alongside a small cohort of similarly obsessive teenagers from around the world. You study together, you analyze together, and all of you share the same quiet, unspoken truth. Only a tiny fraction of the players sitting in that training hall will ever reach the sport's absolute top tier. No matter how brilliant, dedicated, or talented every single one of you currently appears, you attempt your first international master norm in your mid-teens, a brutal, uncompromising standard requiring a precise performance level across multiple games against a field packed with already titled grandmasters. You fall short on your first attempt, and the second you lose a critical final round game that would have secured the norm, and you walk out of that tournament hall in complete silence because by this age you have already learned the cold logic of the board. Public displays of devastation accomplish nothing. They do only one thing: confirm to the opponents watching in the hall that they have found a psychological weakness worth exploiting again in the future. You earn your International Master title after your third serious attempt. But rather than celebrating, you immediately begin preparing for the far more demanding Grandmaster title. Because inside the chess world, the IM title is widely understood as a serious accomplishment that nonetheless still sits well below the sport's actual summit. You watch players around you plateau permanently at exactly this level, stuck for years despite continuous punishing effort, and you realize the truth of the road ahead. The gap separating where you stand now from the Grandmaster title is not a small final step. It is frequently the largest, most unforgiving barrier in the entire sport. You spend your late teens traveling almost constantly to tournaments specifically selected for their potential to produce Grandmaster norms, playing in countries whose languages you do not speak, sleeping in budget hotels steps away from quiet, cavernous tournament halls. Your family's finances are stretched thin to fund travel that offers no guaranteed return because chess, unlike almost any other elite global pursuit, offers prize money at lower levels so modest that it barely covers a train ticket. Most rising players operate at a significant financial loss for years, sacrificing every resource they have for a professional payoff that may never arrive at all. You experience your first serious loss of confidence in your late teens, an agonizing stretch of tournaments where your rating drops noticeably. Your preparation feels increasingly inadequate against opponents who seem to have leapt past you, while your own progress has ground to a complete halt. And during this period, you learn the hard lesson every serious chess player eventually learns. This sport is not a straight upward climb. It is a grueling series of plateaus and regressions that test not your talent, which was never really in question, but your psychological endurance, your capacity to sit down at the board with genuine, unshakable confidence long after your results have given you every single reason to doubt yourself. You rebuild through an intense, relentless period of study focused specifically on your weaknesses, reviewing hundreds of your own losses with a coldness that took years to develop, refusing to let ego protect you from seeing exactly where your understanding falls short. You begin working with a stronger coach, a grandmaster himself, who does not simply correct your moves, but begins reshaping your entire mental architecture. He forces you to unlearn the habits of your youth, teaching you to evaluate positions the way the world's absolute strongest players actually think, rather than the way you were taught to think as a promising child years earlier. You secure your final Grandmaster norm in your early 20s. After nearly a decade of unrelenting directed effort since your very first tournament, and the moment the result is finally confirmed, sitting alone in a hotel room, calculating the tournament's final standings on your phone, you feel an emotion far quieter than you ever expected after so many years, anticipating this exact outcome. Less explosive joy than a profound almost disorienting relief because you understand immediately what very few people outside competitive chess will ever fully grasp. Becoming a grandmaster does not end the difficulty. It simply grants you entry into the specific tier of competition where the difficulty genuinely begins. You enter the professional circuit in earnest in your early 20s, competing against players you grew up studying from books, men and women whose iconic games you memorized as a child, now sitting directly across a physical board from you. And you quickly learn the quiet, pragmatic reality of the grandmaster life. Professional chess income, outside a small handful of the sport's absolute elite, remains remarkably precarious. Most grandmasters are forced to supplement tournament prize money with private coaching, online content, or corporate sponsorships. Because chess, despite the crushing depth of mental skill it demands, has never rewarded its practitioners financially the way other professional sports reward theirs. You devote your mid-20s to opening preparation at a level that borders on obsessive, working with chess engines capable of calculating positions far beyond the limits of any human mind, memorizing engine-verified lines extending dozens of moves deep. You understand that modern chess has been permanently transformed. A grandmaster today must combine intuition with exhaustive, computer-backed theory, an entire second discipline layered on top of the traditional game. Then you play your first game against a reigning world champion. The concentration required across those 4 or 5 hours exhausts you more thoroughly than physical labor ever could. Your opponent finds impossible resources in positions that seemed entirely lost. You lose. But you lose a position so hyper-complex that even post-game engine analysis takes time to explain where it turned. Afterwards, your coach tells you that the loss itself represents genuine progress, a strange, specific kind of consolation that only makes sense inside a sport this demanding. You navigate the isolating reality of a career built almost entirely around solitary preparation and individual competition. No teammates to share the specific burden of a devastating loss, no locker room camaraderie, simply you, a board, and the accumulated weight of a defeat that you and you alone are responsible for processing before your next game, often only hours later in the very same tournament. Out of necessity, you build mental armor, quiet rituals shared silently among elite players to compartmentalize a loss fast enough to sit back down, clear your mind, and play at full strength. You reach your peak rating in your late 20s or early 30s, cracking a threshold that places you among an extraordinarily rare group worldwide. And looking at the list of names above and below you, a quiet truth settles in. You now occupy a permanent place in the sport's historical record, a landmark that exists forever. Independent of any single tournament result to come, you begin in your 30s, transitioning gradually toward coaching alongside competitive play, teaching a new generation of prodigies the same tactical patterns your own coach once drilled into you, recognizing in a 9-year-old student's intense concentration a version of yourself decades earlier. And you find a specific satisfaction in teaching that your own hard-won victories never quite provided in the same way. You are asked occasionally by a talented young player facing their first serious loss whether the decades of sacrifice were worth it. The missed birthdays, the plateaued years of self-doubt, the financial precarity that shadowed even your greatest successes. And you consider the question with the same careful deliberation you would bring to a complex board. You think about the singular clarity of total absorption in a position with everything on the line, a state of mind you have never found anywhere else in your life. And you tell them the truth. This game will take enormous amounts from you and offer no guarantee of anything in return. But for the specific kind of mind drawn toward this particular obsession, there was never really any other path available at all. And somewhere right now on an ordinary kitchen floor, a 5-year-old is watching a parent move pieces across a board with unexpected seriousness, learning in a single afternoon how each piece moves, with absolutely no understanding yet of the decade of sacrifice, the isolating weight of competition, or the specific gap between one title and the next that this single afternoon is setting into motion. or what it might feel like after everything to finally sit across a board from a childhood hero and lose a position so complex that even a machine needs time to explain where it slipped away.